Thanks for staying with us here on Morning Live. Now, Eskom's court papers reveal details of 12 individuals cited as defendants against whom the entity plans to recover money from. Now, the power utility, working with the Special Investigations Unit, or the SIU, is trying to recover about 3.8 billion rand of the money that was lost through dubious business dealings. The report mentions specific former executive members and how the utility lost money through their conduct when they approved deals that worked against the interest of the state-owned entity. Eskom generates about 95% of the country's electricity and is a main driver in the economy. So a viable Eskom is a viable South Africa. We're joined now by both Thanduxolo Jika, who is an investigations editor at the Mail and Guardian, and political analyst Lukhona Mnguni. Thanks so much, gentlemen. Welcome to Morning Live.
Morning.
Thank you and good morning, Sakina.
Thanduxolo, starting with you, you've written extensively about Eskom, key power and economic entity here in South Africa. So exactly how important is this particular move by Eskom and the SIU in the broader context?
In the broader context, Sakina, this is quite an important move in the sense that at years of unabated corruption in state-owned entities, be it Eskom or Transnet, it is important that this might actually show the seriousness of state-owned entities against dealing with corruption, and also holding accountable executives and board members who actually do not make decisions in the best interests of either the state or state-owned entities. And this might actually assist in helping in the near future with dealing with delinquent directors, etc.
Lukhona, on your part, as Thanduxolo says that it should be important, but we've seen in the past there have been many inquiries about Eskom and Eskom-related issues. There's even been a parliamentary inquiry. The Zondo Commission has heard a lot of evidence, and they've been going through all of these matters related to Eskom. But the question is, how is this particular instance going to be a differentiator?
Well, Sakina, it's very interesting because what the SIU does in this instance is to go for civil claims against certain implicated individuals. Now, we haven't seen the SIU being successful much with this cause of action. If you remember very well, it was about 6 years ago that they took to task the then Gandla architect, Minenhle Makanya, and I think then they were claiming about 155 million rands from him, and that matter remains in the courts, hasn't been heard much, and it's 6 years on. Now, if you read those summons, Sakina, they do indicate that corruption would have taken place and people would have conspired in corrupt ways. Now, corruption is a criminal offense in our country. It doesn't come out quite clearly as to why the cause of action is a civil route in terms of a civil claim, rather than instituting corruption charges against these individuals. And I say this on the backdrop that some of the monies that are being claimed against certain individuals might not be recovered because those individuals just do not have that kind of money. Some of that money didn't accrue to them as individuals. It is lost. Is money lost in the course of their execution of tasks within the roles that they would have played either in the executive or the board. Now, how successful will Eskom be with the SIU in recouping this money? That remains to be told, whether these individuals actually have that kind of money to begin with. And if they do not have that kind of money, it might actually end up being an exercise, I don't want to say in futility, but it might end up being an exercise that takes away from the confidence that people might have on this process.
Well, we already saw yesterday, one of the people mentioned, Brian Molefe, in an interview that he did yesterday, saying that He hasn't been engaged at all. He hasn't ever been given a chance to offer his side to the story, hasn't been contacted by the SIU. Matelo Koko, for his part, he claims that he was cleared by the 2017 Eskom internal investigation and hasn't even been summoned to appear before the Zondo Commission. So, Thanduxolo, in that regard, what do we know in terms of this process, and also to what Lukhona is saying, it remains to be seen how far this will actually go. And the matter is that it's a civil claim, and when or why do we not see any criminal charges possibly flowing from this at this particular stage?
Look, Sakina, Lukhona has got a good point in terms of the issue of corruption. It's a criminal matter, and in terms of the Prevention and Combating of Corrupt Activities Act, a number of people should have been by now been criminally charged. But we must not also play down a scenario where Eskom might also feel a bit confident after managing to take civil action against companies such as Trillian, which was also Gupta linked, and a company such as McKinsey, who agreed to pay back the monies that they benefited from Eskom, where they were working without any contracts. So it should not only be about criminal charges. In my view, there needs to be a move, particularly when it comes to the South African state and the state-owned entities, to actually recover monies from any process that is deemed to have been corrupt. Essentially, what you are also doing, you are actually ensuring that besides people just going to jail and getting pardons after a few months of being in jail, there are some serious consequences. So I think maybe because of the Trillian and the McKinsey matter, SIU believe that this is the best way to actually go after the said individuals. And yes, of course, other individuals might not have the amount of money, but I think it's a step in the right direction in many ways.
Step in the right direction. Of course, Eskom in a huge hole to the tune of 450 billion rand at least. Now, we're talking about the recovery of 3.8 billion rand. Where are they losing the rest of the money, or where have they lost it, Thanduxolo?
Well, most of the amounts that they are looking for, because you would see from those court, the SIU also starts around the issue of Estina in the Free State, the Friede Farm situation, where basically government money was diverted, for individual gains. The Guptas were there, but the state has seen no progress there. There's no farm. There's no dairy farm. The locals have, those who were meant to be beneficiaries, have gone to the Zondo Commission and detailed how there's actually no dairy farm. But that itself is a problem. Money was spent by the state, but they have seen no benefits. Nobody has actually benefited from that, except for Msebenzi Zwane, who took his choir to India for some reason, and the Guptas took money. Also, then monies were actually lost in the prepayment to the Guptas when they were trying to buy Optimum Mine through Tegeta, where basically they had no money. There was about 600 and odd million that they needed to acquire Optimum from Glencore. And that money was paid by Eskom. Essentially, the Guptas paid no cent from their own pocket. The state and the taxpayers were continuously funding those. And there's also the Transnet transactions, the South China Rail locomotives. Even there were monies that went to companies such as Homix, which was essentially just a letterbox company. We are talking about multi-million rands, which were being diverted from one company to the next company. And when you look at it at face value, it shows a money laundering trade So those monies went into that. So it's not only just Eskom. You've got Transnet, you've got the dairy farm in the Free State, where nobody has actually benefited, but the Guptas and they did benefit from these transactions. So in many ways, if the state was to only just focus on criminal charges, I think a lot of people get away with it. What would make them stop from diverting state resources and conspiring to corrupt the state?
Lukhona, the broader point here is that, yes, I think many people would probably say this is the right way to go. Eskom has to get to a point where it tries to get back the money from whoever took it, go after all and sundry. But all and sundry should mean that Eskom would be casting a much broader net because it's not just this cohort of people or the so-called state capture that has led to Eskom losing money. Eskom is losing money for a whole lot of other reasons as well. Transactions, tenders that they've gotten into that are really not beneficial to the entity, as it were. So speaking of those commissions that have gone before, should Eskom be going after more people in order to try and recoup money?
Sakina, there's no doubt that that should be happening. As you are saying, you ought to be casting your net much wider. Now, if you are going to solve the leaking tap at Eskom, it definitely has to go beyond just the state capture narrative. You will know, Sakina, that Eskom has come under fire on a variety of issues, particularly where it loses money the most, because it's in its generation division where Eskom loses most of its money, in the construction particularly of Kusile and Medupi. And now, Kusile and Medupi do not feature much in the state capture narrative, in part because that process was already captured a long time before the Guptas sort of tried to move into Eskom. In fact, at times I have said, what enabled the Guptas to behave in the manner that they did with their acolytes at Eskom is because precedent had actually been set that in fact at Eskom there is just this leaking tap that you come and collect under and you move out and allow others to go on. If you go back to the questions around Hitachi, the boilers that they have supplied at Eskom, the manner in which they leak and they have to be continuously repaired, how that has driven up a very high cost maintenance budget for Eskom on new power stations that shouldn't be costing us so much to maintain at this current point in time. But they do, they continuously trip, the units are tripping there, and there are other variety of problems. So Sakina, if we are honest about Eskom, we probably would need a much more thorough approach. There have been investigations even done in the US on how there are allegations of corruption in some of the procurement processes, particularly in that generation division construction of those two power stations. So I think if you are going to be talking as to where was the 450 billion rands at least that Eskom is owing lost, it is mainly in that generation division, and much needs to be done on how do you recoup that money. And of course, Jika is correct, that the SIU might find some confidence in how your Trillian and McKinsey's actually responded to claims against them. But let's remember, these are companies that are trying to salvage some standing and reputation in society, and the individuals that are implicated in this instance are people who have, in some instances, acted with impunity. They have not been remorseful of their conduct, and they continue to believe that their actions were correct. And I think this is where the trouble is going to come in with this phase of the inquiry. But of course, we look forward to say what can be done. But as you are saying, 3.8 billion, yes, it's an important start. Whatever cent Eskom can get is important because it saves you and I probably future tariff hikes. But in the broad scheme of things, I think there's still a lot more work to unearth the rot of contract and procurement at Eskom.
And those commissions coming at a cost, of course. They are not free and they are not cheap. But Thanduxolo, the order also mentions, the one that we are currently discussing, an application to attach Gupta assets, and the three Gupta brothers are also on the list of those defendants. But the brothers, we know, have since left the country. So what are the chances of a positive outcome in that regard, given that we have been hearing that the state is waiting to build a watertight case against the Gupta brothers before they pursue that particular avenue? So what does this mean in terms of this particular order already going after the Gupta brothers?
Look, Sakina, to be quite honest, in terms of the Gupta brothers, I think we're gonna find it very actually get anything out of there, particularly since they're no longer here in South Africa. The only hope is that the Guptas, parties such as Eskom have registered themselves as creditors. You would remember sometime early this year, assets of the Guptas were being, auctioned. So they might actually get a few cents from there. But in reality, when it comes to Guptas, how many assets do they have here in South Africa that have not been attached already? There were a lot of creditors that Guptas. And so that then Eskom might have actually registered themselves as one of the creditors and trying to recoup money from the properties or any other asset that was being auctioned belonging to the Guptas. Otherwise, it's pretty much of a futile exercise that, the Guptas are not here. You are likely to deal with the people that are already inside the country. Brian Molefe, Machela Koko, whom have also said, they've done nothing wrong. The likes of Musebenzi Zwane, Anoj Singh. But, it all depends on what do you actually get in terms of their assets. What kind of assets do they have here inside the country?
Lukhona, how does this play into the dynamics within the African National Congress?
Can you repeat that?
Well, in the immediate, it doesn't have much bearing in the immediate. Safe to say that there are, of course, implicated parties such as Musebenzi Zwane, who was compromised even before the 2019 elections, appeared before the Integrity Commission of the ANC, and his subsequent appointment as a chairperson of the Portfolio Committee on Transport, if I'm not mistaken, sort of signaled that he had been forgiven or given the green light by the party. But of course, we know that those dynamics continue to be discussed within the ANC as to the standing of the Integrity Commission, the seriousness to which its work it is being taken, and just how comrades do not appear to respect its recommendations, and at times those recommendations are not even tabled to the NEC, as we had over the last weekend when the chairperson sort of was protesting to the NEC on that matter. But I think at a political level, Sakina, we would say an action of this nature serves as a deterrent against malfeasance and corruption within the organization, so that other political players would desist from acting in this manner. However, as we have seen with the COVID-19 emergency procurement and the allegations that are surrounding that, it seems there's no such deterrent that exists. And if the ANC and its members do not take seriously the issue of corruption in our society and how almost fed up society has become with this, because it has direct implications on public funds, taxpayers, and on the cost of living in the country. If the ANC doesn't take this seriously, they will find themselves on the back foot politically, and they might not be able to recover in subsequent elections.
And in addition to that, Thanduxolo, one of the other things that Eskom has also done, they've also now embarked on a much more aggressive drive of trying to recoup monies owed to them by municipalities. And Samkelo Maseke yesterday in an interview with the ANC's Secretary General Ace Magashule put a question to him, to which Mr. Magashule responded that if you look at Maluti Apofung in the Free State, they owe Eskom 5.3 billion rand, and Eskom has subsequently gone on to attach the municipality's bank account. But Mr. Magashule was saying Eskom needs to understand these municipalities are, not viable. They simply don't have the money. But of course, politics has played a huge role in not just the viability of those municipalities or the non-viability of them, but also Eskom. So with regard to that, Andre de Ruyter and his task right now, his mandate, do we know more about that in terms of how he plans to move further and casting that net wider in recouping monies owed to Eskom?
Look, Sakina, there isn't much that, I would know at this stage regarding that. But there is this huge drive at Eskom to recover whatever monies that are owed to Eskom, be it municipalities who have just in the past decided not to pay. I mean, they're cancelling a number of contracts. And not only do they just cancel the contracts, they then follow up with demands for payments on these contracts, which they believe were wrongfully awarded. When it comes to the issue of municipalities, we know for a fact that they've been used in terms of battlegrounds and in terms of governance. They have not been well run. Monies have been diverted in many municipalities. We've written a number of articles about the corruption that happens at municipal level. So it doesn't make sense that at some point that these municipalities get to just struggle financially, after having been given monies and not actually spending anything in terms of infrastructure. I mean, you can go to Madibeng in the northwest. Services are just not there. So it also brings a question as to what then happens to the money that Treasury gives, that the taxpayers actually give to these municipalities. Some of them even took money and invested money into VBS Mutual Bank. We're talking about millions of rands, which was, which also raises questions as to how is the governance in these municipalities? What was the thinking in taking residents and taxpayers' money into VBS Mutual Bank that we now know was actually not really investing the money, but money was supporting other people's lifestyles?
So just a quick one, a prediction from both of you on how you think this current Eskom situation will play out. What do you think the outcome will be? Lukhona?
I think it's going to drag for some time with no end in sight in the immediate. Generally, court proceedings of this nature can be quite lengthy. So, Sakina, I mean, as I said to you, still awaiting the SIU to be successful with the Ngandla architect. Of course, the circumstances are a bit different, but I'm not optimistic that it will wrap up anytime soon.
Thanduxolo?
I share the same view as Lukhona. It's going to drag out for a very long time. I think, individuals such as Machelo Koko, I mean, he's made it public and said this is just a public stunt. Which also, tells you that people are willing to fight in court. So it's not going to, be an easy one for Eskom at all.
Well, gentlemen, that's all we have time for. Thank you both, political analyst Lukhona Mnguni and Thanduxolo Jika, investigations editor at the Mail and Guardian, for discussing the implications of the court papers served by Eskom and the SIU in trying to recover money from cited defendants, and those monies, of course, owed to Eskom, not owed to Eskom, but have been taken from Eskom, and they're trying to recoup it, as it were. All right.